gone again. Oh, that's a big crash.
So a recovery period at that point was kind of issued around about 16 weeks, which was set to rule him out at the end of the championship.
Chapter 1. Breaking news open. Marc Márquez's 2025 season ended in the cruelest way imaginable. Just 1 week after securing his 7th MotoGP World Championship in dominant fashion, the 32-year-old Ducati rider was taken out in a first-lap collision at the Indonesian Grand Prix. The injury looked manageable at first, but as the weeks progressed, reality set in. Márquez would miss not just the remaining rounds of 2025, but critically, the Valencia post-season test, where Ducati's 2026 prototype would be unveiled. Tonight, we examine the shocking statements Márquez has made about his return, the medical reality behind his recovery, and why his absence from Valencia could reshape the entire 2026 championship battle before it even begins. This is the story of a champion forced to watch from the sidelines while his rivals prepare for war. What makes this situation even more dramatic is the timing. Márquez was not fighting for a championship when the injury occurred. He had already secured the title. This was supposed to be his victory lap, his moment to celebrate one of the greatest comebacks in motorsport history. Instead, it became a nightmare reminder of just how fragile success can be in the unforgiving world of MotoGP. The Indonesian circuit at Mandalika has never been kind to Márquez, and this latest incident only reinforced that troubled relationship with one of MotoGP's newest venues. In fact, Márquez has never finished a race at Mandalika, making it one of the few circuits on the calendar where he has consistently struggled to find rhythm and confidence. Chapter 2. What just happened? The statements from Márquez have been clear and sobering. Speaking to the media, the newly crowned champion confirmed that everything is progressing well with his recovery, but critically, this new fracture has not aggravated his previous injuries from 2020. He emphasized that he will be in top form in 2026, but there is a catch. While Márquez hopes to return to riding a bike well before the Sepang test in February 2026, he cannot confirm with 100% certainty that he will be there. The uncertainty is palpable. Márquez's message to the MotoGP world has been definitive. He stated that whether he is competitive in 2026 will depend on his physical condition, not on whether he has missed one more race or the Valencia test. This is a champion prioritizing long-term health over short-term gains. Speaking from Astana, Márquez made it clear there would be no rushed return to the bike, no Valencia test participation, and his goal is simply to try for the Sepang tests in early 2026. The message is unmistakable. Ducati's reigning world champion will not risk his entire career for a single test session. The medical reality adds weight to his caution. Ducati sporting director Mauro Grasili revealed that Márquez needs until early January 2026 to return to full fitness, with 4 weeks where his arm must remain absolutely immobilized. This is not a minor setback. This is a complete shutdown of all training, all riding, all motorcycle activity until deep into the winter. The implications are staggering. For a professional athlete whose entire career depends on split-second reactions, muscle memory, and physical conditioning, losing months of training time is devastating. While his rivals will be logging thousands of kilometers on their machines, perfecting their setup and building race fitness, Márquez will be sitting still, his arm locked in position, unable to even begin the rehabilitation process. This is the price of proper healing, and Márquez has learned through bitter experience that shortcuts lead to disaster. The official medical reports painted a picture of cautious optimism tempered by realistic timelines. Doctors confirmed that the healing of the fracture in the shoulder blade and the ligament injury in the right shoulder was progressing positively and normally. But positive and normal does not mean fast. The human body heals on its own schedule, and forcing that schedule has consequences. Márquez knows this better than anyone. His attempted comeback in 2020, rushing back from his Jerez arm injury, led to years of complications, multiple surgeries, and a nightmare that nearly ended his career. He will not make that mistake again. The scars from that period, both physical and mental, serve as constant reminders of what happens when ambition overrides medical wisdom. Márquez has publicly stated that he remembers 2020 as the biggest mistake of his career, not because he crashed, but because he tried to return before his body was ready. The rehabilitation protocol prescribed by his medical team represents state-of-the-art sports medicine. The 4-week immobilization period allows bone healing to progress without interference. Following that, physical therapists will gradually introduce range of motion exercises, then strength training, and finally sport-specific movements. Each phase must be completed successfully before progressing to the next. There are no shortcuts, know ways to accelerate the process without risking re-injury or long-term complications. For an athlete accustomed to pushing limits, this methodical approach requires discipline and patience that may be more challenging than any race he has ever competed in. Chapter 3. How we got here. Marc Márquez's 2025 season was nothing short of extraordinary. He won 11 Grand Prix races and 14 sprint races, clinching the championship with 5 rounds to spare at Motegi. It was the culmination of one of the greatest comeback stories in motorsport history. At 32 years old, he became the oldest rider to win the Premier Class title in the 4-stroke era, and his 6-year drought between titles was the longest in championship history. The season began with a statement of intent. After years of struggle at Honda, including devastating injuries and 31 missed races between 2020 and 2023, Márquez joined the factory Ducati team for 2025. He became only the second Ducati rider to win on his debut with the factory team, after Casey Stoner. The victories came thick and fast. He set the record as the rider with the most MotoGP wins in a row with Ducati, achieving 7 consecutive victories from Aragon to Hungary. His dominance was unprecedented. He achieved the most doubles in a single season with 10, taking both sprint and Grand Prix victories at the same weekend, breaking Francesco Bagnaglia's previous record of 5 from 2024. His journey to the championship was marked by incredible statistics: 541 points, 201 points ahead of the runner-up. The numbers told the story of complete supremacy. The transformation from his 2024 season to 2025 was remarkable. In his debut year with Gresini Ducati on the year-old machinery, Márquez had shown flashes of his old brilliance with 3 race victories, but consistency was elusive. The move to factory Ducati with the latest specification bike unleashed something that the MotoGP paddock had not seen since 2019. An unstoppable Marc Márquez, combining his legendary aggression with newfound maturity and the best motorcycle on the grid. The combination resulted in what Ducati general manager Luigi Dall'Igna described as a natural harmony between an extraordinary talent and meticulous work from a passionate and competent team where each enhanced the other. The championship battle was effectively over by mid-season, while his brother Alex mounted a spirited challenge on the year-old Gresini Ducati, finishing second in the standings. No rider could match Marc's combination of speed, consistency, and racecraft on the factory machine. Race weekends throughout 2025 saw Márquez repeatedly complete the double, winning both sprint and Grand Prix, with his weekend at Mobility Resort Motegi playing out slightly differently as teammate Francesco Bagnaia led the way through qualifying before securing victory in both the sprint and Sunday's race. But 2 second-place finishes were more than enough for Marc to secure the title with 5 rounds remaining. The Motegi weekend itself was emotional beyond measure, following an incredibly emotional cool-down lap, with his fellow riders each taking a moment to congratulate him, surrounded by cheering fans. A tearful Márquez stopped at the side of the track for his celebration, watching a video prepared by his management and friends showing the unbelievable journey he had been on since he was last crowned MotoGP World Champion in 2019. That video captured surgeries, rehabilitation sessions, crashes, and moments of despair that the public had never seen. It was a raw, honest portrayal of what it took to climb back to the top. The emotional release at Motegi demonstrated just how much weight Márquez had been carrying throughout his comeback journey, and how validation through championship success provided closure to years of doubt and suffering. But everything changed in Indonesia. At the Pertamina Grand Prix of Indonesia, Márquez started from the 3rd row, while Marco Bezzecchi began from pole position. Bezzecchi did not get the best start, and as Márquez moved forward, the 2 riders came close together on track. Bezzecchi attempted to move up the inside and tag the back of Márquez's Ducati. The collision sent both riders flying into the gravel trap, and Márquez landed on top of his right arm, the same arm that had caused him so much suffering since 2020. The immediate aftermath was concerning. Márquez was seen clutching his shoulder and later appeared with his arm in a sling. MotoGP medical director Dr. Angel Chart confirmed that Márquez had slight pain and trauma to his right shoulder, with an X-ray showing a small fracture. But the full extent of the damage would only become clear once Márquez returned to Spain. The crash itself was particularly violent. High-speed impacts in MotoGP rarely end well, and when a rider lands directly on a previously injured limb, the psychological trauma can be as damaging as the physical injury. For Márquez, that split second when he felt something wrong in his shoulder must have triggered memories of Jerez 2020, when a similar high-side crash began the darkest period of his entire career. Bezzecchi immediately came to Marquez's trackside to apologize, clearly understanding the severity of what had happened. Marquez later released a statement asking fans not to have hard feelings towards Bezzecchi, calling it a racing incident and stating that this is simply part of racing. This measured response demonstrated the maturity that now defines Marquez's approach to the sport. The old Marc might have harbored resentment or blamed his rival publicly. The new Marc understands that crashes happen, and maintaining professional relationships in the paddock matters more than assigning blame for an unfortunate incident. Chapter 4. Deep breakdown of the core event. Medical examinations at the Ruber International Hospital in Madrid revealed the true nature of the injury. Marquez had sustained a fracture at the base of the coracoid process, part of the shoulder blade, along with a ligament injury to his right shoulder. For most people, this would be a painful but manageable injury. For a MotoGP rider, it is catastrophic. The coracoid process is a small, hook-shaped bone that projects from the shoulder blade. It serves as an attachment point for several muscles and ligaments that stabilize the shoulder joint. When you combine a fracture to this bone with ligament damage, you create a situation where the shoulder cannot handle the enormous forces required in MotoGP racing. Under heavy braking, a MotoGP rider experiences forces exceeding 1.5 G. The arms become the primary anchor for the entire body. When a rider slams on the brakes from over 330 kilometers per hour into a 90 kilometer per hour hairpin, the shoulder must absorb and control tremendous load. With a fractured coracoid and damaged ligaments, this becomes impossible without risking permanent damage. The biomechanics of motorcycle racing place unique demands on the human body that are difficult for non-riders to comprehend. Unlike car racing, where the driver is strapped into a seat with a steering wheel for support, a MotoGP rider is effectively hanging off the side of a machine, traveling at speeds that would be lethal in a crash. Every braking zone requires the rider to pull themselves forward against massive deceleration forces. Every corner entry involves supporting body weight on the inside arm, while the bike is leaned over at angles that defy physics. Every acceleration phase requires gripping the tank with the knees, while the arms resist the bike's tendency to wheelie. All of this happens hundreds of times per race, thousands of times per season. A healthy shoulder is essential. A compromised shoulder is a ticking time bomb. The medical team treating Marquez includes some of the most respected orthopedic surgeons in Spain. Dr. Samuel Antuna and Dr. Ignacio Roger have extensive experience with sports injuries, particularly in motorsport athletes who place extreme demands on their bodies. Their conservative initial approach reflected modern sports medicine philosophy. Avoid surgery when possible, as surgical intervention carries its own risks and complications. However, when the injury failed to stabilize naturally, they made the difficult decision to operate, knowing that proper surgical repair would ultimately provide better long-term outcomes than continued conservative treatment of an unstable injury. Marquez himself described the immediate aftermath of the crash with chilling clarity. He noticed something in his right shoulder that was not right, and the alarms went off. The concern was inside, though he remained quiet in Indonesia. This is a rider who knows his body intimately after years of injury struggles. When Marc Márquez says the alarms went off, you listen. Critically, doctors confirmed that the injury had no connection with previous injuries, and there was no significant bone displacement. This was both good news and bad news. Good, because it meant his previous surgeries and recoveries were not compromised. Bad, because it still required an extensive recovery period that would keep him off the bike for months. Initially, doctors opted against surgery, choosing a conservative treatment plan involving rest and immobilization of the affected shoulder. However, after 1 week of immobilization, the coracoid fracture and ligament damage were not showing sufficient signs of stabilization. Marquez explained that the swelling went down, and he woke up one Sunday with his collarbone out of place. Doctors then decided to operate, and now he must respect the recovery time with no lasting effects expected. The surgical intervention changed everything. What was initially hoped to be a 4 to 6 week recovery suddenly became a 16-week rehabilitation period. Marquez's doctor predicted a 16-week recovery after surgery, which would take him right up to the Sepang test in February 2026. The margin for error had evaporated completely. 16 weeks is an eternity in professional motorsport. It spans the entire off-season, consuming the crucial winter testing period when champions are forged and championships are won or lost. For context, 16 weeks represents roughly 112 days of complete inactivity on a motorcycle, during which muscle memory fades, cardiovascular fitness declines, and competitors gain advantages that may prove decisive when racing resumes. Chapter 5. Immediate impact. The immediate consequences for Ducati were severe. Márquez confirmed he would not compete again in 2025 and would miss the Valencia test. He must keep his right shoulder completely immobilized for a minimum of 4 weeks before rehabilitation can begin. This meant no participation in the final rounds at Portimao and Valencia, and critically, no presence at the November 18th post-season test, where the 2026 prototype would be evaluated. Ducati test rider Michel Pirot stepped in as Márquez's replacement for the Australian and Malaysian rounds. Pirot is an experienced test rider with deep knowledge of Ducati's machinery, but he is not Marc Márquez. The data, the race pace analysis, and the feedback that Márquez would have provided were simply irreplaceable. Ducati general manager Gigi Dall'Igna acknowledged the difficulty, stating, "It was a shame, because having Márquez on track was very important, but the priority was to recover and return 100% fit for the next season." World Superbike runner-up Nicolo Bulega was initially considered as a potential replacement for the final rounds, but he ultimately declined the opportunity. Bulega's hesitation was understandable. Jumping onto a MotoGP machine without prior testing would have been enormously challenging, and the risk of damaging his reputation or sustaining injury outweighed any potential benefit. His decision left Ducati relying entirely on Pirot, a capable but limited option given the test rider's primary role focuses on development rather than race performance. The championship standings were already decided. Marc and Alex Márquez had become the first ever pair of brothers to finish first and second in the Premier Class Championship. Ducati had secured the manufacturer's championship, but the absence of their star rider from the Valencia test created a strategic nightmare. Rivals such as Francesco Bagnaia would gain crucial development time with the new prototype. Bagnaia struggled massively on the 2025 specification bike, with his season summarized by 6 Grand Prix retirements wedged around his dominant weekend in Japan. He needed this test desperately to provide feedback for 2026 development. The question of engine and aerodynamics decisions for the 2026 bike became complicated. Márquez had delegated responsibility for these decisions to his Ducati stablemates, specifically Bagnaia and Alex Márquez, believing they could provide the right feedback at Valencia. However, Ducati would ultimately force Márquez to have the decisive vote in decisions he had delegated to Bagnaia. This put Ducati in an impossible position: make critical development decisions without their reigning champion's input, or wait and risk falling behind in the development race. The political dynamics within the Ducati camp added another layer of complexity. Bagnaia had endured a frustrating 2025 season, watching his new teammate dominate on identical machinery, while he struggled with crashes and mechanical issues. Now Bagnaia would have the Valencia test largely to himself, an opportunity to shape the 2026 bike around his preferences without Márquez's overwhelming influence. Would Ducati engineers prioritize Bagnaia's feedback over Márquez's absence? Would they wait for Márquez to test at Sepang before making final decisions? These questions had no easy answers, and the wrong choices could determine who wears the crown in 2026. Chapter 6. Long-term impact and future. The long-term consequences extend far beyond the final rounds of 2025. Márquez agreed with Alex Márquez and Bagnaia that Ducati's 2026 bike has a good base for next season. Speaking to La Sexta, Márquez explained that nothing can be changed in terms of the engine for next year, and aerodynamics issues must be decided but can be rejected at the Malaysia test if needed. His confidence stems from the belief that if the bike works, it works for everyone, and if it does not work for anyone. But missing the Valencia test creates a fundamental disadvantage. Every other factory rider will have spent 2 full days evaluating the new prototype, understanding its strengths and weaknesses, and providing detailed feedback to engineers. Márquez will arrive at Sepang in February with 0 experience on the 2026 machine. Márquez acknowledged this reality, stating that in the Valencia tests, the engine and aerodynamics are being tested, and Ducati has 2 riders suited for that work: Alex Márquez, the runner-up, and Bagnaia. He will meet them at the Sepang test and adapt to whatever he finds. The physical preparation timeline is equally concerning. Márquez himself acknowledged that a hard winter awaits, with significant work needed to rebuild his musculature completely to be ready for 2026. This is not just about healing a fracture. This is about rebuilding strength, endurance, and race fitness from scratch after months of immobilization. The typical MotoGP offseason involves intense physical training, testing sessions, and constant bike development work. Márquez will have none of that. Márquez revealed another complication that fans were unaware of. He still has a bent screw in his shoulder from previous operations, though it remains under control for now. This remnant from his devastating 2020 Jerez crash serves as a constant reminder of how fragile his physical condition remains. One wrong move, one premature return, and the consequences could be career-ending. According to expert Matt Oxley, the 2026 bike will be the 2024 specification in all but name. If accurate, this would favor Márquez significantly, as he dominated on that platform throughout 2025. But without his direct input during the critical Valencia development phase, there is no guarantee the final 2026 machine will suit his riding style perfectly. The devil lives in the details with MotoGP machinery. A millimeter change in ride height, a degree of adjustment in steering geometry, or a modification to engine braking characteristics can transform a winning bike into an unrideable disaster. These subtle refinements are discovered through countless laps of testing, and Márquez will miss the first and most important opportunity to influence that development. Chapter 7. Expert-Style Commentary. Behind the scenes, this decision reveals the maturity Márquez has gained through his injury struggles. In his interview with CNN Sports after winning the championship, Márquez explained his mentality for the final races had changed. He simply wanted to finish the races and prepare well for 2026, noting it did not matter if he won 1, 2, or 5 more times, because the main target was already achieved. This psychological shift is profound. The old Marc Márquez would have fought through pain to compete. The new Marc Márquez understands that championships are won over entire seasons, not individual races. Márquez also opened up about the darkest periods of his career. His younger brother, Alex, had previously revealed that during the worst moments, Marc was like another person, another character, angry with everybody. Marc confirmed this was completely true, acknowledging those years taught him many things for his personal life and changed his character fundamentally. The injuries cost him years of his career, but they gave him perspective and wisdom that the younger, more impulsive Márquez never possessed. Márquez also credited the importance of family and friends during his recovery periods, noting that when people asked who helped him most, he would say only one name, Alex. His brother helped him directly sometimes, but sometimes unknowingly, simply by continuing to race and keeping Marc connected to MotoGP even when he was stuck at home recovering. This revelation highlights the psychological importance of maintaining connection to the sport during injury layoffs, preventing the isolation and depression that can accompany extended absences from competition. This psychological transformation directly influences his approach to the current injury. Márquez stated that the doctors told him if he respects the recovery timeline, there will be no consequences, and that is why he refuses to force the machine or rush the process. He emphasized that being more or less competitive in 2026 will be marked by his physical condition, not by the Valencia test, or whether he completes some more races in 2025. His priority this winter is clear: complete recovery, nothing else matters. Ducati faces its own strategic calculations. General manager Gigi Dall'Igna fully supported the decision not to take further risks, calling it the best choice for everyone. But privately, engineers must be concerned about developing a championship-winning motorcycle without input from their fastest rider. The 2025 machine worked brilliantly for Márquez, but caused enormous problems for Bagnaia. If the 2026 bike evolves primarily around Bagnaia's feedback during Valencia testing, will it still suit Márquez's aggressive, front-end focused riding style? The internal dynamics become even more complex when considering that Alex Márquez finished second in the standings on the year-old bike and has earned factory specification machinery for 2026. This creates an unusual situation where Marc's closest championship rival next season will be his own brother, riding identical equipment with more preseason testing experience on the new prototype. The psychological and competitive dynamics of this situation cannot be understated. Brothers racing against each other is nothing new in motorsport, but brothers competing for a world championship on equal machinery is rare. The Márquez family has always maintained a close bond, with Alex supporting Marc through his darkest injury periods. But when the lights go out in 2026, family loyalty must take a back seat to championship ambition. There is also the question of motivation and momentum. Márquez has spent 2025 proving he is still the fastest rider in the world. winning 11 races, 14 sprints, and dominating the championship re-established his status at the pinnacle of MotoGP. But now, he must sit idle for months, watching his rivals test and prepare while he focuses solely on rehabilitation. When asked about his emotions since Indonesia, Márquez described feeling a bit strange, acknowledging the injury arrived at a moment when he should be celebrating, but also noting it came at the best moment because everything was already closed championship-wise. The philosophical question becomes whether Márquez can maintain his competitive edge through a winter of forced inactivity. History suggests he can. He has already overcome the longest wait between MotoGP World Championships in history at 6 years, surpassing Casey Stoner's previous record of 4 years. If any rider has proven they can come back from adversity, it is Marc Márquez. But each comeback becomes harder than the last. The body accumulates damage, the mind accumulates doubt, and the competition never stops evolving. The young challengers like Pedro Acosta are hungry and fearless. The established champions like Bagnaia are desperate to reclaim their dominance. And every single rider on the grid knows that Márquez's winter of inactivity represents their best opportunity to close the gap before the season begins. Chapter 8. Strong Ending. Marc Márquez's 2025 season ends not with glory, but with silence, a fractured shoulder, a missed testing opportunity, a winter of rehabilitation that will test his patience like never before. But the champion's words carry confidence. Everything is going well, and most importantly, this new fracture has not aggravated his other injuries, so he will be in top form in 2026. The stakes for 2026 have never been higher. Márquez will arrive at Sepang with less preparation than his rivals. He will step onto a new prototype motorcycle for the first time, while everyone else has 2 full days of Valencia testing data. He will face his own brother on identical machinery, both fighting for the championship. And he will do all of this at 33 years old, an age when most riders are considering retirement, not mounting championship challenges. But dismiss Marc Márquez at your peril. He has already proven he can win championships after more than 5 years of drought, something no rider in history had accomplished before him. He has survived 5 surgeries on his right arm and shoulder. He has crashed 108 times since his last championship in 2019 and still found a way to return to the top. This is not a rider who gives up easily. The 2026 season will answer fundamental questions about Marc Márquez's legacy. Can he defend his championship despite the worst possible off-season preparation? Will the 2026 Ducati suit his riding style without his development input? Can his body withstand another full season of punishment at the highest level of motorcycle racing? And perhaps most importantly, does he still have the fire, the determination, and the raw speed to beat riders 10 years younger who have not endured the physical trauma he has suffered? Márquez's statistical achievements in 2025 already place him among the all-time greats. He now equals Valentino Rossi with 7 MotoGP titles, trailing only Giacomo Agostini, who has 8 Premier Class championships. His 73 MotoGP victories place him second only to Rossi's 89 wins. These numbers represent a legacy that is already secure. But Márquez is not finished. He has 2 years remaining on his Ducati contract, and every indication suggests he intends to fight for both championships. Márquez himself has framed 2025 and 2026 as 2 chances to try to win, acknowledging they may be his last opportunities. This candid admission reveals a rider who understands the realities of age, injury history, and the brutal physical demands of MotoGP. He is not promising 5 more years at the top. He is focusing on the present, on maximizing the remaining years, while his body can still compete at the highest level. This pragmatic approach may actually work in his favor, removing the pressure of long-term planning and allowing him to attack each season with nothing to lose. The historic nature of his 2025 championship cannot be overstated. Márquez became the 6th rider in history to win MotoGP World Championships with different factories, joining an elite club that includes Casey Stoner, Valentino Rossi, Eddie Lawson, Jeff Duke, and Giacomo Agostini. This achievement alone would cement his legacy as one of the sport's greatest riders, proving that his success was never dependent on a single manufacturer or machine, but rather on his own extraordinary talent and adaptability. The Valencia test will proceed without him. His rivals will gain valuable data and experience, but Marc Márquez has made his statement clear. He will return when he is ready, when his body is healed, and when he can compete at 100%. not a moment sooner. The king may be temporarily sidelined, but he has not abdicated his throne. The countdown to Sepang has begun, and the MotoGP world waits with bated breath to see if the champion can defy the odds once again. History has shown us never to bet against Marc Márquez. The question is not whether he will return, but whether anyone can stop him when he does. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.